She has a scar identical to the Mafia boss's dead wife. He grabbed her arm. Who are you really? The rain in Montero City's industrial zone was a different kind of water. It tasted of metal and exhaust, falling and heavy. Gray sheets that turned the streets into dark mirrors of neon and rust. Lena Marcelli liked the rain. It was loud. It drowned out the other sounds, the ones that lived only in her head, and it kept people away. Her apartment was on the third floor of a brick walk-up that smelled of damp plaster and fried onions. It was not a home. It was a holding cell she paid for. One room, a galley kitchen with a buzzing refrigerator, and a bathroom where the medicine cabinet mirror was cracked. Lena never looked at the mirror anyway. She lived by a set of careful, quiet rules. Rule 1, 2 deadbolts and a chain lock. Check twice before bed. Rule 2, keep your head down, always. Rule 3, never wear short sleeves. On her left wrist, just above the delicate bump of her ulna bone, was a scar. It was a pale, silver crescent, smooth as silk, and she hated it. It was the only piece of her past that had survived, and it felt like a brand. Lena Marcelli had only existed for 3 years. Before that, there was nothing. A void. The doctors, the ones at the free clinic she'd woken up in, had called it dissociative amnesia. They told her there had been a car accident, a bad one, fire. She'd been lucky to survive. They said, emerging with only minor burns, a concussion, and a life scrubbed clean. Sometimes, she did not feel lucky. She fought the dreams every night. They were always the same, a kaleidoscope of terror, the smell of gasoline and something sickeningly sweet, like burnt roses, the sound of shouting, a man's voice, desperate, a flash of intense heat, screams, and the rhythmic, metallic pop of gunfire. She always woke up with her heart trying to hammer its way out of her chest. Her hands clenched so tight her fingernails left matching crescent moons in her palms. To pay for the apartment she hid in. Lena worked the graveyard shift at Orion's Diner. It was an all-night joint wedged between a tire shop and a defunct textile mill. The clientele was a mix of truckers running on fumes, third-shift factory workers, and the city's insomniacs. Lena, with her quiet movements and her knack for avoiding eye contact, fit right in. She was just the pale girl who poured the coffee. Tonight, the rain was relentless. It was 2 a.m, the diner empty save for a lone trucker nursing a slice of apple pie at the far end of the counter. Lena wiped down the chrome milkshake machine, her movements automatic. The diner smelled of stale grease, bleach, and burnt coffee. It was the smell of her life. The bell above the door chimed, a cheerful, jarring sound. A gust of cold, wet air swept in, carrying a man with it. Lena did not look up. Not at first. She grabbed a menu and a glass of water, her gaze fixed on the center of the Formica counter. "Just coffee," a voice said. It was a low voice, rough like gravel, and it vibrated with an authority that made the hairs on her arms stand up. She looked. He was sitting in the corner booth, the one with the torn vinyl. He was not a trucker. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than her apartment building. It was damp with rain, tailored perfectly to broad shoulders. His dark hair was slicked back, revealing a face that looked carved from hard angles. But it was his eyes that held her. They were a piercing, glacial blue, and they were staring at her with an intensity that felt like a physical weight. He looked cold, tired, and dangerous. Lena's instinct screamed at her to retreat, but she was at work. She nodded, her throat tight, and turned to the coffee machine. Her hands were steady as she filled a heavy white mug, but she could feel his stare on her back, dissecting her. She walked to the booth and set the mug down. Her hand was steady. "Cream or sugar?" she asked, her voice a practiced, neutral whisper. He did not answer. He was not looking at her face. His gaze was locked on her wrist, her sleeve, damp from wiping the counter. Had ridden up, 1/2 inch, just enough. The silver crescent scar was exposed under the harsh fluorescent light. The man froze. It was not a subtle pause. It was a complete cessation of movement, as if time itself had stopped in that booth. His shoulders tensed, and the color drained from his face, leaving behind a stark, bone-white pallor. He looked, just for a second, not dangerous, but shattered. A sharp, ragged breath hissed through his teeth. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. She tugged her sleeve down, a reflexive, panicked motion. The man's blue eyes snapped up to hers. The shattered look was gone, replaced by a storm of disbelief, confusion, and a raw, primal anger that terrified her. "Where did you get that?" he demanded. His voice was no longer just rough, it was shaking. Lena took a step back, bumping into the empty booth behind her. It's just a scar." "What did you say?" "It's just a scar," she repeated, louder. "From an accident." He stared at her, his eyes tracing every line of her face, her dark, wavy hair, the fear in her brown eyes, the shape of her mouth. He looked like a man seeing a ghost, or worse, a miracle he wanted to destroy. He was Dante Moretti, a name whispered in Montero City with equal parts fear and reverence. He was the head of the Moretti Syndicate, a man who had inherited an empire of shadows and ruled it with an iron grip. He was a man who had lost everything that mattered, and it had hollowed him out, leaving nothing but cold duty and colder grief. He did not see Lena Marcelli, the waitress. He saw Elena. His wife. He saw the night, 3 years ago, on the coast road, the dinner, the argument, a stupid fight about nothing, about everything. He saw her turning away from him, her dark hair catching the moonlight, and he saw the scar on her wrist. It had been their scar. He had given it to her, in a way. On their honeymoon in Sicily, she had slipped on the wet, ancient stones of an alleyway. He had caught her, but her wrist had scraped against the rough stone wall, a tiny cut that he had kissed, tended to, and teased her about. It became a small, intimate map of their life, a place his thumb would trace when they lay in the dark. He saw the drive home from that dinner. He had been in the car ahead, with his men. She had been following in her own car, a concession to their argument. He had been watching her headlights in his rearview mirror, and then the mirror had filled with a white-hot light. The explosion had thrown his own car sideways. He remembered the sound, a deafening, hollow thump that had punched the air from his lungs. He remembered scrambling out, shouting her name. Even as the heat blistered his face, there was nothing left, just a mangled, burning chassis. The report had been simple, a car bomb, sophisticated. The body, they said, was unrecoverable, consumed, 3 years of walking through the world as a ghost, and now, in a 2-bit diner at 2 a.m, a ghost was pouring him coffee. Lena watched, terrified, as the man's face cycled through a war of emotions. He stood up abruptly. The booth screeched against the floor. He threw a $10 bill onto the table. It fluttered beside the untouched coffee. He did not say another word. He just turned and walked out, the bell chiming his departure, leaving behind a vacuum of cold air and the suffocating weight of his stare. Lena sagged against the counter, her breath coming in short, painful gasps. The trucker at the end of the counter had not even looked up. Her shift ended at 4 a.m. The rain had softened to a miserable drizzle. She wrapped her coat tightly around herself, her head down, and began the 6-block walk back to her apartment. The industrial zone was dead at this hour, the streetlights casting weak, sickly yellow pools on the wet pavement. She heard the footsteps behind her. They were heavy, measured, and keeping pace. She sped up, her heart leaping into her throat. The footsteps sped up. She turned into the alley that was a shortcut to her building. A mistake. She knew it the second she did it. It was a dark canyon of brick and dumpsters. She was halfway through when the man stepped out of the shadows in front of her. It was him. The man from the diner. Lena froze, her back hitting the cold, wet brick. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice shaking but laced with the sharp edge of a cornered animal. "I want to know who you are," Dante said. He stepped closer. The rain slicked his dark hair. He was no longer the stunned man in the booth. He was the predator she had first seen. "I'm no one. I work at the diner. Please, just leave me alone." "You're lying." He was only a few feet away. He was searching her face again, hungry, desperate. Her name was Elena. "I don't know any Elena," Lena whispered, tears of panic stinging her eyes. "The scar," he said, his voice dropping. "Let me see it." "No." He moved faster than she could have imagined. He did not hit her. He simply grabbed her left arm. His grip was like a steel trap. Lena cried out, struggling, but he held her fast, his other hand pushing up the sleeve of her coat and her sweater. He stared at the scar, his thumb tracing the silver crescent in the gloom. A choked sound escaped him. It was real. His glacial eyes lifted to hers, burning with a terrifying, agonizing hope. "Who are you really?" he growled. The question ripped through her. "Who are you?" The one question she could never answer. The panic overwhelmed her. It was pure, white-hot adrenaline. She reacted without thinking. She drove the heel of her other hand up, smashing it into his nose. Dante roared, more in surprise than pain, his grip loosening for just a second. It was all Lena needed. She shoved him, hard, sending him stumbling back against a dumpster. She ran. She did not look back. She sprinted out of the alley, her boots slapping the pavement, the sound of her own ragged breathing filling her ears. She ran the remaining blocks, fumbled with her keys, slammed the door of her apartment, and threw both deadbolts and the chain. She slid to the floor, her back against the door, trembling so violently she thought she might break. In the alley, Dante straightened up, wiping a smear of blood from his nose with the back of his hand. He did not chase her. He watched the direction she had fled, his expression unreadable in the dark. His phone was in his hand. He dialed a number. "Marco," he said, his voice flat and cold. "I have a situation, a woman, Lena Marcelli. She lives at 221 West Industrial. Put a car on her. Discreet. I want to know where she goes, who she talks to, and what brand of toothpaste she uses. Do not let her out of your sight." He hung up. He leaned against the brick wall, the rain washing the blood from his hand, and stared into the darkness, his mind consumed by the impossible. Dante Moretti's investigation was swift and brutal. By noon the next day, a file was on his desk. It told him exactly what he already suspected, and exactly nothing at all. Lena Marcelli, age unknown, estimated mid-20s, Social Security number issued 3 years and 2 months ago, no driver's license, only a state ID, no credit history before that date, no relatives, no past. The paper trail began the day she was discharged from the Montera City Free Clinic. "It's a ghost, his consigliere," Marco said, standing stiffly in Dante's penthouse office. "Ghosts don't bleed," Dante said, staring at a grainy photo his man had snapped of Lena walking to the bus stop that morning. He placed it next to a framed photo on his desk, a photo from his wedding, Elena laughing, her head thrown back. The facial structure was identical. The shape of the eyes, the mouth, it was impossible. It was her. "Find out who treated her at that clinic," Dante ordered. "I want a name." Lena did not sleep. She sat on her cheap sofa, wrapped in a blanket, until the sun came up. The encounter in the alley had torn a hole in her fragile peace. "Who are you really?" She called her therapist. "Doctor. Levan's office. I need to speak with him. It's Lena Marcelli." "Doctor." Levan came on the line, his voice as smooth and calming as ever. "Lena, how are you? You missed your appointment last week." Something happened," she stammered, twisting the phone cord. "A man. He knew me, or he thought he did. He said I looked like his wife. He knew about my scar." There was a pause on the line, not a surprised pause, but a calculating one. "Lena, we've discussed this." "Doctor," Levan said, his tone gentle, paternal. "The mind is a fragile thing. It protects itself. Your past is hidden for a reason. That car accident was a significant trauma. Trying to force those memories or letting a stranger implant false ones could be dangerous. It could undo all the progress we've made. But he looked at me like he knew me," she whispered. "He knew a woman who looked like you. A coincidence. You are Lena Marcelli. That is your life. The past is better left buried. Do you understand?" Yes, doctor." She hung up. But the words offered no comfort. They felt hollow, rehearsed. That night, sleep was not a refuge. It was an ambush. The dream was clearer this time. She was in a church. Incense. She was wearing a dress of heavy white lace, a wedding dress. A man was beside her, his hand in hers. She could not see his face, but she could feel his thumb tracing the scar on her wrist. Then the image shattered. Blood. So much blood. Bright crimson soaking the white lace, the smell of burnt roses, the sound of a single, deafening gunshot. Lena woke up with a silent scream locked in her throat, her body drenched in a cold sweat. She was crying, deep, gasping sobs for a life she could not remember and a death she could not forget. She had to go to work. The rent was due. She was exhausted, her nerves shredded. Every time the diner bell chimed, she jumped. She was pouring coffee, her hands shaking. When the bell rang at 10 p.m., he walked in, Dante Moretti. Lena's heart stopped. She nearly dropped the coffee pot. He did not go to the dark corner booth. He slid onto a stool at the counter, directly in front of her. He looked different. The raw, desperate anger from the alley was gone. He was composed, his cold blue eyes clear and sharp. He wore a dark gray shirt, no suit jacket. He looked, if possible, even more imposing. Lena forced her feet to move. She stood opposite him, the stainless steel counter a flimsy barrier between them. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Dante did not answer for a long moment. He just watched her, her pale face, the dark circles under her eyes, the tremor in her hands. "Coffee," he said calmly, his voice a low rumble that cut through the diner's quiet hum. Black. The tension was a living thing. It was a wire pulled taut between his cold, unyielding certainty and her cautious, terrified warmth. He was a man who had come to reclaim a ghost, and she was a woman who was not sure she was even real. Lena's hands were shaking so badly she had to set the coffee pot down. She gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles white. Dante Moretti just watched her, his blue eyes unblinking, analytical. He took a sip of the black coffee, his expression giving nothing away. He was a statue of patience, a predator who knew his prey was already cornered. He stayed for hours. The diner's other patrons, a few tired factory workers, a pair of cops on a break, came and went, none of them daring to make eye contact with the man at the counter. They felt the aura of power radiating from him, a cold spot in the warm, greasy air. Lena felt it like a physical pressure, a hand on her chest. At 4 a.m., her shift replacement, a gum-chewing woman named Bev, arrived. Lena untied her apron with fumbling fingers, her eyes fixed on Dante's back. She hung it on the hook. "Lena," he said. Without turning, she froze. "Your shift is over. Sit down." It was not a request. Bev's eyes widened, and she quickly busied herself at the register. Lena walked slowly, her legs feeling like water, and slid into the booth opposite him. The vinyl was cold. He turned to face her, his arm resting on the back of the booth. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. "You grabbed me in an alley," she whispered, her hands clenched in her lap. "I was surprised," he admitted, and the words sounded foreign on his tongue. "I apologize for that, but not for finding you." He paused, his gaze dropping to her left wrist, which she had instinctively hidden under the table. "I once knew someone who looked exactly like you, not just a passing resemblance, exactly, down to the smallest detail." He looked up, his eyes locking with hers. She had a scar on her left wrist, a silver crescent. She got it in Sicily, on our honeymoon. She slipped on wet stones, and I caught her, but her arm scraped the wall. I felt like I'd broken something priceless. Lena's breath hitched. A flash. Sunlight. The smell of lemons and the sea. A man's laughter. It was there and gone. So fast it left her dizzy. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice trembling. "I told you. I was in an accident, a car crash, 3 years ago." "And you remember nothing before it?" he pressed, his voice soft, insistent. She shook her head, tears welling up. "It's gone. Everything, my name, my life. It's all just black. The doctors said it was trauma." "The doctors," he said, the words clipped, dismissive. He leaned in, and the space between them crackled. "Your name isn't Lena Marcelli. Your name is Elena Moretti. You are my wife." The words hit her like a physical blow. "No," she said it instantly, a reflex. No, you're wrong. You're grieving. I'm sorry for your loss. I truly am, but I am not your wife. I can't be. She was pleading with him, her denial the only thing holding her together. She died, Lena choked out. The man in the alley, that was you. You said her name was Elena? You loved her, but she's dead. Her car exploded, Dante said, his voice a low, brutal monotone. They never found a body. For 3 years, I believe that fire took her. For 3 years, I have been a dead man walking. His eyes burned into her. And then I walk into a diner, and I find you. You are not a ghost. You are real. And you are sitting right in front of me. Please, she begged, tears streaming down her face. Please stop. You're scaring me. His expression softened, the hard certainty replaced by a flicker of the same pained confusion she felt. I don't want to scare you. I want to help you. He reached across the table, but she flinched, and he drew his hand back. Come with me. To our home. I can show you things. The house. Your things? Maybe something will help you remember. This was it. This was the trap. The rich, powerful, grieving man wanted to turn her into a replacement for his dead wife. Doctor. Levon had warned her. No, she said, her fear hardening into resolve. She slid out of the booth, grabbing her thin coat from the hook. I'm not your wife. I'm not a project. I'm a person. Leave me alone. She fled the diner, the bell's chime sounding like an alarm. She ran into the pre-dawn chill, not looking back, praying he would not follow. He did not. She made it back to her apartment, her body shaking so hard she could barely fit the key in the lock. She slammed the door, threw the 2 deadbolts, and fastened the chain. She leaned against the wood, her heart hammering. He was insane, grieving and insane. He had built a fantasy around a coincidence, a scar. How many people had scars? But his words echoed. I felt like I'd broken something priceless. She shook her head, trying to clear it. She was Lena. She was safe here. He was just a man. A dangerous man. Yes, but he wouldn't come here. She was exhausted, but sleep was impossible. She paced her small room, the dream of the wedding dress, the blood, the gunshot. It felt less like a dream now and more like a warning. She was in the bathroom, splashing cold water on her face, trying to wash away the image of his blue eyes, when she heard it. It was not a loud noise. It was a soft snick from the main room, followed by the faint groan of wood. She froze. Her heart climbed into her throat. She was not alone. Someone was in her apartment. She looked around, her eyes wide with terror. There was no weapon, no escape. The bathroom had no window. She backed against the tiled wall, holding her breath, listening silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. Then a soft scrape, a footstep on her worn linoleum floor. She squeezed her eyes shut, her mind screaming. The man from the diner? Had he followed her? Had he picked her locks? Minutes stretched into an eternity. Then she heard the distinct sound of her apartment door clicking shut, not slamming, gently, deliberately closed. She waited, her body rigid, for a long, long time. Finally, her terror was overtaken by a desperate need to know. She crept out of the bathroom, her hands balled into fists. The apartment was empty, but the air was cold. The window over her small kitchen sink was open, the cheap lock on it broken, the wood splintered. Rain misted the air, and on her small Formica kitchen table, there was something that did not belong. It was a photograph, 5 by 7, lying face up. Beside it, a single, perfect white rose. Lena approached the table as if it were a bomb. Her eyes fell on the photograph. Her stomach dropped. It was a wedding photo. The man was Dante Moretti. He was younger, his face not yet carved into stone. He was smiling, a genuine, breathtaking smile. And he was looking at the woman beside him. The woman was her. It was undeniably her face. Her hair, longer, was swept up, a veil trailing behind her. She was wearing the lace dress from her dream. She was smiling back at him, her hand in his, and on her left wrist, clearly visible, was the silver crescent scar. Lena's legs gave out. She grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. It was not possible. It was a trick. Then she saw the rose. It was beautiful, its petals just beginning to unfurl, but across the soft white, there were drops of liquid, dark, viscous, and crimson. It was blood, still wet, a warning. She stumbled back, a scream building in her throat. Before she could make a sound, a thunderous pounding rattled her apartment door. "Lena, open the door, now!" It was Dante's voice. Not calm, not composed. It was a raw, commanding roar. She was trapped. A killer had been in her apartment, and now this man was at her door. She ran to it, her mind spinning. "Lena, I know you're in there. He's gone, but you are not safe." His man. He had said he had a man watching her. She fumbled with the chain, her fingers slipping. She undid the deadbolts and wrenched the door open. Dante burst in, pushing her behind him as he scanned the room. His eyes were frantic. Behind him stood another man, older, in a dark suit, his face grim. Dante saw the open window, then his gaze snapped to the table. He saw the photo. He saw the blood-stained rose. The air left the room. The color drained from his face, leaving that same bone-white pallor she had seen in the diner. But this time, it was not grief. It was a volcanic, murderous rage. He looked at the rose, then at her, his expression a mask of fury and self-loathing. "My man saw him," Dante said, his voice dangerously quiet. "He went over the fire escape. He was masked. We lost him in the alleys." He took a step toward her. "He was here, inside, with you." Lena could not speak. She just pointed at the photo, her hand shaking. "I know," he said, his voice softer now, laced with a terrifying urgency. "I know this is why you have to come with me. This is not a request. This is not a debate. They know you are here. They know you are alive." "Who?" she whispered. "Who are they?" "The people who tried to kill you 3 years ago," he said, his words hitting her with the force of a physical blow. "The people who took you from me. They left that rose to tell me they found you first." He grabbed her coat from the back of the chair. "You are not safe here. You will never be safe here. You are coming with me, now." She did not protest. The fight was gone, replaced by a cold, numbing dread. The man in her apartment, the photo, the blood. It was real. Her fragmented life was not just a tragedy, it was a lie. She let him wrap the coat around her shoulders. She left her apartment, her keys, her job, her entire 3-year existence, and walked out into the rain with the man who claimed she was his wife. The mansion was a fortress of dark stone and ivy perched on the cliffs overlooking the gray, churning ocean of Montera City. The drive had been a silent blur in the back of a black, armored sedan that smelled of leather and steel. Dante led her inside. The foyer was vast, with a marble floor and a sweeping staircase. It was not a cold museum. A fire roared in a massive fireplace. The air smelled of old wood, floor polish, and something faint and floral, lemon. As they passed a grand piano in a side alcove, Lena's fingers twitched. A melody, light and complex, danced at the edges of her mind. She could almost hear it. Dante watched her pause. "You used to play," he said, his voice quiet. "Every night." She pulled her hand back as if burned and hurried after him. He led her down a long hall, the walls lined with portraits of people she did not know. At the end, she stopped. French doors looked out onto a sprawling, dark garden, the silhouettes of rose bushes visible in the rain. "The roses," she whispered, her hand on the cold glass. She knew this place. She had dreamed of it. Dante came to stand behind her. She could feel the heat radiating from his body. "It was your garden," he said. "You spent hours out here." He guided her into a library. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling. He walked to the desk and picked up a heavy silver frame. He held it out to her. It was the same photo from her apartment, the wedding, but this one was clear, bright. The joy on the woman's face was incandescent. It was her face. Lena took the frame. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass, pale, terrified, superimposed over the smiling bride. The contrast was too much. The life in that photo, the love, the certainty, it was a world away from the shadows she lived in. Tears blurred her vision. A sob, sharp and painful, tore from her throat. "That's not me," she choked out. She shoved the frame back at him, needing to deny it. needing to escape the crushing weight of a life she could not remember. "I don't know who that is." He took the photo, his expression unreadable. He did not argue. He just guided her out of the room and up the sweeping staircase to a guest suite. It was larger than her entire apartment, decorated in creams and soft blues, with its own fireplace and a bed that looked like a cloud. "You will be safe here," he said, his voice formal. "There are guards posted at your door and in the hall. No one can get to you." A prisoner in a palace. She was too tired, too frightened, to care. She collapsed onto the bed and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep for the first time in years. The next few days were a blur. Lena existed in the opulent, quiet mansion, a ghost in her own supposed life. She and Dante moved around each other, two bodies locked in a strange, silent orbit. He would find her in the library or staring out at the rose garden, and he would talk. He never pushed. He just told her. Stories. Stories about Elena, how she hated olives, how she would hum the piano melody that Lena almost remembered, how she would sneak into the kitchen at midnight to steal biscotti. Lena listened. And a strange thing happened. She began to see the man behind the mask. She saw the torment, the profound, aching grief he carried. He was not just a cold-blooded boss. He was a man ripped apart. And his vulnerability, his unwavering belief in her, was a force more powerful than any threat. A dangerous spark began to grow, a connection that had nothing to do with memory and everything to do with the man sitting across from her. On the third night, a storm raged, cutting the power to the entire estate. The emergency lights flickered on, casting long, eerie shadows, but the house was mostly plunged into darkness. Lena found her way to the library, lit only by the raging fireplace. Dante was there, standing by the window, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, watching the lightning split the sky. "You're afraid of the dark," he said, his voice a low rumble. "No, just the shadows," she replied, wrapping her arms around herself. He gestured to the two large leather chairs by the fire. "Sit, the storm will pass." They sat in silence for a while, the only sounds the crackle of the fire and the howl of the wind. The candlelight softened the hard lines of his face, revealing the weariness in his eyes. "Why are you so sure?" she asked, her voice quiet. He looked at her, his blue eyes illuminated by the flames. "Because every part of me that died when you did came back to life the second I saw you in that diner. My mind might not understand it, but my soul does." He set his glass down and reached out, his movements slow, giving her time to pull away. She did not. His fingers, calloused and warm, gently brushed the hair back from her face. His touch was hesitant, almost reverent. A jolt went through her, warm and electric. His thumb traced her jawline, and she trembled. He leaned in, his gaze fixed on her mouth. "Do you feel it?" he whispered. She could not answer. She could only nod. He lifted her left hand. His thumb found the scar, tracing the crescent shape, again and again. "I missed this," he breathed, his voice thick with 3 years of suppressed pain. He leaned in closer, his lips brushed hers. Once, a feather-light touch. It was not a kiss of possession, it was a question, an agonizing plea. He waited. Slowly. She met the kiss. It was not a passionate explosion. It was something deeper, slower and more emotionally shattering. It was hesitant, tender, a collision of his desperate certainty and her terrified confusion. It tasted of whiskey and smoke and a profound, shared sadness. It felt like recognition, not of a memory, but of a missing piece. The feeling was too much. It was overwhelming. This was not her. This was Elena's life, Elena's husband, Elena's kiss. Lena broke away, her breath coming in short gasps. She pushed gently against his solid chest. "I can't," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry, I'm not her." She fled the library, her heart pounding, and retreated to the safety of her room, locking the door behind her. She left Dante alone in the firelight, his hand clenched into a fist on the arm of the chair, his face a mask of renewed loss, far away. In a dark surveillance van parked on a hill overlooking the estate, a man watched the grainy, black and white footage from the hidden camera in the library. Nico Valente, Dante's most trusted capo, watched the kiss. He watched the woman run. He slammed his fist against the console. The break-in, the rose. It was meant to be a final warning, to drive her away, to make Dante see her as a liability. Instead, it had driven her straight into his protection. He's falling for her all over again. Nico snarled to the man beside him. Or he's falling for the ghost. It doesn't matter. He rewound the footage, watching the kiss again, his jaw tight. He'll never believe the truth now. Not from me. We have to finish it. For good. The morning light, gray and heavy from the storm, seeped into Lena's guest room. She had not slept. She had sat in the window seat, watching the sky lighten, her hand periodically rising to touch her lips. The kiss. It had not felt like a betrayal of her own identity. It had felt like a homecoming, and that, more than anything, terrified her. She was not Elena. She was Lena, a quiet, scarred woman who poured coffee and hid from the world. But when Dante Moretti had touched her, when his mouth had claimed hers, a part of her she never knew existed had risen to the surface, sharp and aching. It was a hunger for a life she didn't know, a grief for a man she'd never met. The conflict tore at her. The walls of the room, so spacious and beautiful, suddenly felt like they were closing in. The air thinned, her chest tightened, a steel band cranking around her ribs. She couldn't breathe. It was not a memory, but the absence of memory that was suffocating her. She was a ghost story, a puzzle, and the man who held all the pieces was just down the hall. She stumbled to her feet, gasping, her vision tunneling. The ornate wallpaper swam. She was going to be sick. She fumbled for the door, needing air, needing to get out, but her fingers wouldn't work. She slid down the door, her back hitting the heavy wood, and dragged air into her lungs in short, desperate sobs. The door was suddenly wrenched open from the other side. Lena fell backward onto the hall carpet, looking up into Dante's face. He had been on his way to check on her. He was dressed, but his hair was still damp from a shower. He froze, taking in her state, her wild, terrified eyes, her tears, the way she was hyperventilating. He didn't coo. He didn't panic. He knelt in front of her, his presence a sudden, solid wall. "Breathe," he commanded. It was not a suggestion. His voice was rough, low. "I can't," she gasped, clutching her chest. "Yes, you can." He didn't touch her, not yet. "Look at me. Just look at me." His blue eyes were intense, focused, pulling her from the vortex. "Breathe with me, Lena." He took a slow, deliberate breath, in through his nose, out through his mouth. He did it again. "Your turn. In." She tried, but the breath hitched, turning into another sob. "Again," he ordered, his voice iron. "In. Hold it. Now out, slowly." She followed his lead. Her eyes locked on his. He was an anchor in the storm. He continued the rhythm. 1 second. 2, 3, 4, until her breathing began to even out, until the crushing weight on her chest receded. His gaze never wavered. Finally, she was just sitting there, exhausted and trembling, the panic attack subsiding. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice raw. "Don't be," he said gruffly. He sat back on his heels, his expression unreadable. "What triggered it?" "Last night," she admitted, hugging her knees. The kiss. And this house. And you." She looked up, her eyes swimming with confused tears. "You have to understand. When you look at me, I know you see her, but when you touch me, I don't feel fear. That's the crazy part. I should be terrified of you, but I'm not." "What do you feel?" he asked, his voice quiet. "Sadness," she whispered. "A sadness so deep it feels like it's been in my bones for 100 years. And something else. Something that feels hungry. It wants to know you. It wants to—" She shook her head, unable to say it. "It feels like I'm grieving for you, even though you're right here." A muscle in his jaw clenched. He finally reached out, his hand hovering before he gently cupped her jaw, his thumb stroking her cheekbone. "It's because you are," he said. You're grieving for the time we lost. You're grieving for yourself." He helped her to her feet and led her downstairs, not to the formal dining room, but to the massive kitchen, where he made her coffee himself, his movements efficient and sure. Later that morning, Dante stood in his office, staring at the gray ocean, a glass of water untouched on his desk. His consigliere, Marco, stood by the door. "She had a panic attack this morning," Dante said, his back to the room. "It's to be expected, Dante," Marco said, his voice practical. "The woman, whether she is Elena or not, has been through a trauma. You've ripped her from the only life she knows." "She said she feels it," Dante said, turning. His eyes were cold, but there was a fire deep inside them. "She's in there. Marco, I know she is. The woman I kissed last night was not a stranger." Marco sighed, running a hand over his graying hair. He was the only man who could speak to Dante this way. And what if you're right? What if, by some miracle, she survived? "It is a miracle," Dante said. "No," Marco said, his voice sharp, cutting. "A miracle is an act of God. This was an act of man. Think, Dante. The bomb was professional. The cleanup was perfect. No body. If she survived, it's because someone pulled her from that car. Someone staged her death, faked the reports, and hid her in plain sight for 3 years. That is not a miracle. That is a betrayal." The word hung in the air, heavy and toxic. "Someone inside my organization," Dante said, his voice flat. "Someone very, very close." Marco agreed. "Someone who knew your movements. Someone who knew Elena's route. Someone who wanted her gone, but maybe didn't have the stomach to kill her. Or someone who wanted to keep her as leverage." He stepped forward. "Be careful, boss. You're bringing her back into the fold. If the traitor is still here, they know they failed. They will not fail a second time." Lena couldn't sit still. The house was a labyrinth of half-formed memories. She wandered, her hand trailing along the polished wood, the cool marble. She was drawn to a room on the second floor, a sitting room that was decidedly more feminine than the rest of the mansion. It was filled with books, not on business, but on art and history. A small, dark wood writing desk sat by the window. On the desk, there was a carved wooden box, inlaid with mother of pearl. Her fingers traced the smooth, cool inlay before she opened it. Inside, on a bed of faded red velvet, sat a delicate ballerina. Lena wound the small key. A melody, tinkling and sweet, filled the quiet room. It was the tune from the piano, the one she almost knew. She sank to her knees. The music box was a key, and it had just unlocked a door. It wasn't a dream, it was a memory. The scent of incense and roses, the heavy, beautiful weight of the lace wedding dress, Dante's hand in hers, strong and warm, his thumb tracing her scar. The sound of the music box melody playing as they left the church, the image shattered, replaced. Heat, the smell of gasoline and burnt roses, the sound of metal groaning. She was in the car, on the coast road. But she wasn't alone. A man was in the passenger seat. Not Dante. A face she couldn't see clearly. He was leaning in, his hand on her shoulder. A harsh whisper. "Nico was right. He'll get us both killed. They'll kill us both. You have to run." Explosion, fire, a scream, her own. Lena collapsed, the music box falling from her hands, the melody winding down with a sad, metallic sigh. She was shaking, her mind reeling from the fragments. Nico, the name meant nothing and everything. They'll kill us both. Lena? Dante was there. He must have heard the crash. He saw her on the floor, her eyes wide with a new, different kind of terror. He saw the open music box. "It was mine," she whispered, pointing at it. "Yes," he said, his voice thick. He knelt in front of her, pulling her against his chest. She was trembling like a leaf. "I heard it. In the church." She cried into his shirt. "And in the car, there was a man. He warned me." Dante's arms tightened around her, his body going rigid. "What? What did he say?" He said, "They'll kill us both, and then fire." Dante closed his eyes, a mask of pure, cold fury settling on his features. The pieces were clicking into place. Marco was right. Betrayal, He pulled her back, holding her face between his hands. Her eyes were lost, terrified. He had to bring her back. "Listen to me, Elena," he said, his voice low and fierce. He used the name, a deliberate strike. "You are not lost. You are right here." He took her hand, the one with the scar, and pressed it flat against his chest, over his heart. The muscle beat, strong and steady, against her palm. "I don't know who I am." She wept. "I do," he said. "You are the woman who owns this. Even if you don't remember me, I never stopped remembering you. This heart never stopped beating for you. You are mine. You have always been mine." He pulled her to her feet, his hands sliding into her hair, and his mouth came down on hers. This was not the hesitant, questioning kiss from the night before. This was a claim. It was rough, desperate, and full of 3 years of agonizing grief and a sudden, violent hope. It was a promise and a threat. She responded instantly, her hands feisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. This was not Lena, the timid waitress. This was Elena. She kissed him back with a matching hunger, a desperation to feel something real, something solid. It was aching, tender, and deeply physical. His arms banded around her waist, lifting her against him, and she wrapped her legs around him, a pure, instinctive movement. He carried her to the chaise lounge by the window, never breaking the kiss. He laid her down, following, his body shielding hers from the world. "They tried to erase us," he whispered against her skin, his lips moving from her mouth to her jaw, to the soft, vulnerable skin of her throat. "They tried to tear you away from me." His hand went to her sweater, his fingers tracing the scar on her wrist through the fabric. With her other hand, she reached up, her fingers fumbling with the buttons of his shirt. He stilled, watching her. Her fingers found the skin of his chest. She felt it. A long, puckered scar on his left side, just above his heart, a mirror of her own pain. She traced it, her touch light, questioning. "A gift," he said, his voice rough, "from a rival family, 2 years ago. They missed." "We're matched," she whispered, her eyes locked on his. "We always were," he said. He kissed her again, slower this time, a deep, possessive kiss that spoke of ownership, of reclaiming what was his. It was a silent vow, a seal of their reunion. The world outside, the threats, the past, it all dissolved, leaving only the two of them, a man and a woman, scarred and broken, finding their way back to whole. That night, the storm had passed, leaving the world quiet and damp. Lena and Dante were in the library, a truce of sorts. She was on the sofa, a blanket tucked around her, a journal open on her lap. She was writing down the fragments, the name Nico, the scent of roses, the whispered warning. Dante was in the chair opposite, reading a file, but he wasn't reading. He was watching her. The quiet was shattered. It was not a single sound, but a volley. The sharp, terrifying crack of high-velocity rifles, followed by the explosion of glass. The massive library windows imploded, raining tempered glass across the floor. Lena screamed. Dante moved in the space between one breath and the next. He launched himself from the chair, crossing the room, and tackled her. He coiled his body around her, shielding her with his own as they hit the thick Persian rug. "Don't move!" He roared over the sound of more shots ripping through the room, chewing up the books on the walls, shattering a priceless vase. He had a gun. Lena hadn't even seen where it came from. It was in his hand, black and lethal. He pushed her, hard, toward the solid oak desk. "Get behind it! Crawl!" She scrambled on her hands and knees, glass cutting into her palms. Another volley of shots. Dante stayed low, returning fire, not wildly, but with 3 controlled, precise shots toward the muzzle flashes in the garden. The gunfire from outside stopped, replaced by shouting. Lena was hyperventilating, the panic threatening to pull her under again, the sound of the gunfire in the dream and the gunfire now merging into one, deafening reality. Dante scrambled behind the desk with her. He shoved her head down, covering her ears. "It's okay. You're safe," he said. His voice a low growl. He was scanning the room, his jaw set, his eyes lethal. She cried out, a terrified animal sound. He pulled her into his arms, crushing her against his chest, shielding her completely. "No one will ever hurt you again, Maso," he promised. His voice a raw, the brutal vow whispered into her hair. "I swear it on my father's grave. I will burn the world down before I let them touch you." The sounds of a battle, his men engaging the attackers, echoed from the grounds. Then, silence. Marco burst in, gun raised, his face grim. "They're gone. 2 men, down by the garden wall. The rest fled in a black SUV. A black SUV. Lena's blood ran cold. Dante's face was white with rage. He looked at Marco. "Nico," he said. It was not a question. "He was supposed to be supervising the ports tonight," Marco said. "Put a tail on him," Dante ordered, his voice deadly calm. "Every man he meets, every call he makes, I want to know what he eats for breakfast. I want him watched 24 hours a day. He just signed his own death warrant." Dante's gaze fell on Lina, who was still shaking, her knuckles white as she gripped his arm. He gently, so gently, loosened her grip and pulled her to her feet. The next few days were a blur of heightened security. Armed guards patrolled the halls. Lina did not leave Dante's side. The attack, terrifying as it was, had broken the final wall between them. She was no longer his guest, she was his. The fight for her memory had become a fight for her life. She wrote in her journal constantly, filling pages with the fractured pieces, trying to build a bridge back to herself. They found a fragile peace in the eye of the storm. One afternoon, she was in the garden, the rose garden, for the first time, flanked by 2 guards. Dante came out. He dismissed the men with a wave of his hand. He walked over to her. She was touching a white rose, the same kind as the one left in her apartment. He didn't speak. He simply knelt before her, on the stone path. He took her hand, the one with the scar, turned it over and pressed his lips to her palm. A kiss of fealty, a king bowing to his queen. "You are the only piece of my life that ever felt real," he said, his voice rough, his eyes looking up at her. "Everything else, the business, the money, it's just noise. You were the only part that mattered." That night, she couldn't sleep. The bond was real, the passion was real, but the questions remained. She was Elena, but she was not. She needed to understand the man who claimed her. She found herself in his office. He was asleep in his chair, exhausted from the past few days, a gun on the desk beside his hand. She walked in, intending to wake him, to tell him to go to bed. Her eyes landed on his desk drawer. It was slightly ajar. Inside, she saw a file, but beneath it, she saw the charred, curled edge of a photograph. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. It was not a wedding photo. It was a surveillance photo, grainy, taken at night. The edges were burned, as if it had been pulled from a fire. It showed a black SUV, its side door open. A man was dragging a woman into it. The woman was limp, her head lolling. It was her. She recognized the dress she had been wearing in the memory flash. Lena's blood turned to ice. He had this. He had this photo. It wasn't from the explosion. It was from before the explosion. He knew she had been taken. The photograph slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the carpet with a soft, damning sound. Dante's eyes snapped open. He was awake instantly, the exhaustion vanishing, replaced by the sharp, lethal focus of a man who slept on the edge of a blade. He saw her. He saw her expression, a mask of pale, cold fury, and he saw the charred photograph at her feet. He didn't speak. He simply rose from the chair, his silence a confession, his face hardening as he prepared for the impact. "What is this?" Lena's voice was not a whisper. It was low, guttural, and trembling with a rage she didn't know she possessed. It was not Lena's voice. It was Elena's. She kicked the photo toward him. "You've had this whole time." Dante looked down at the image of his wife being dragged, limp, into the black SUV. "Yes," he said. The word was a slap. "Yes? You let me wander around this house like a confused child. You let me believe I was crazy. You let me think you were just a grieving husband, clutching at straws." Her voice cracked. the rage underpinned by a profound, agonizing betrayal. But you knew I didn't die in that car. You knew I was taken. I knew, he said, his voice flat. And I have been hunting for that black SUV every day for 3 years. I did not know I was looking for a waitress. I thought I was looking for a hostage. I thought you were being held, tortured. And when you found me, she shot back, advancing on him. Why the lies? Why the performance? Why the sad stories about your dead wife? It was not a performance, he roared, the first crack in his iron control. He stepped toward her, his own anger rising to meet hers. I found you pouring coffee. You had no memory. You were terrified of me. What was I supposed to do? Drag you from the diner and tell you that the man who wanted you dead was probably one of my own? That you were safer as a ghost? I was protecting you. Protecting me? She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Or possessing me? Am I your wife, Dante? Or am I your prisoner? Am I a person, or am I just this thing you lost that you want back? The words hit him harder than a bullet. He recoiled, his expression crumbling. I can't be here, she said, her chest tight, the same suffocating panic from before returning. But this time it was not a medical condition. It was a logical one. I can't breathe. She turned and ran. Elena, wait, he shouted, his voice desperate. She didn't. She fled the office, shoving past the 2 stunned guards at the door. They moved to stop her, but Dante was right behind her. Let her go. Don't touch her. She ran down the grand staircase, her mind a white-hot blank. She just needed to be out. Out from under his roof, his lies, his protection. She had survived for 3 years on her own. She had been poor, haunted, and half alive. But she had been herself. This new life was a beautiful, suffocating cage built on a foundation of secrets. She burst through the massive front doors into the cold, damp night. The air was sharp, and it cleared her head just enough to give her a single, desperate purpose: the gate. She ran down the long, paved driveway, stones cutting into her bare feet. She had no coat, no shoes, no plan. She heard Dante shouting her name from the porch, but she didn't look back. The gates were 200 yards away, black iron spears against the night sky. She was halfway there when the world was filled with the blinding glare of headlights. A black SUV, identical to the one in the photograph, screeched to a halt, cutting off her path. 2 men, clad in black, wearing ski masks, burst from the side doors. Lena screamed, skidding to a stop on the wet pavement. She turned to run back toward the house, but they were too fast. One grabbed her by the waist, a brutal, vice-like grip that lifted her off her feet. The other clamped a gloved hand over her mouth. Stifling her scream, she fought. This was not the timid waitress. This was the woman who had survived. She bit down, hard, drawing blood. The man cursed, his hand recoiling, and she screamed, a single, piercing cry for help. She kicked her legs, smashing her heel into the other man's shin. "Get her in the van!" one of them shouted, his voice muffled. He was trying to get his hand back over her mouth when a sound, sharp and final, cracked through the night. A gunshot. The man holding her waist grunted, his grip suddenly slackening. He looked down at his chest, a dark, spreading stain. He collapsed, pulling her down with him. The second man froze, his eyes wide. He fumbled for the gun at his own waist, but he was too slow. Dante was there. He stood 20 yards away, his legs planted, his arm outstretched. He was not a grieving husband. He was the king of Montero City, a killer defending his territory. 2 more shots. They were not loud. They were precise. Controlled pops from a silenced weapon. The second man was thrown backward against the side of the van, his weapon clattering to the pavement. He slid to the ground, leaving a dark smear on the black paint. Silence. The only sounds were Lena's ragged, desperate gasps and the crunch of Dante's shoes on the driveway as he advanced. He did not look at the dead men. His eyes, lethal and burning with a terrifying fire, were locked on her. He holstered his weapon and strode the last few feet. He did not coo or ask if she was all right. He reached down, grabbed her arm, and hauled her to her feet, pulling her into an embrace so tight it bruised her ribs. He crushed her against his chest, his hand buried in her hair, holding her head against his shoulder as his entire body trembled with adrenaline and a rage so profound it was shaking the foundations of the world. He held her for a long, silent minute, his heart hammering against hers. "You are worth everything," he whispered, his voice a raw, broken growl against her ear. "Do you hear me? Everything." He did not take her back to the mansion. He led her to one of the black sedans in the garage and drove, himself, to a safe house. It was a sterile, modern apartment in the city's financial district, a place of glass and steel that held no memories. Marco was there, his face grim, the place already secured. Lena sat on a leather sofa, a thick blanket wrapped around her. Though she was not cold, she was numb. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind the chilling image of Dante's lethal precision. He had killed 2 men. For her. She looked at him. He was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights, a glass of water in his hand. "Tell me the truth," she said. Her voice was steady. "Not the story, not the lies, the truth." Dante turned. He looked at her, at the woman he had almost lost for the second time. He nodded. "I received an anonymous call," he began, his voice a low monotone. "Intel from a source I had used before. He said the Calabresi family was planning to hit me, to break my power. He said they were going to do it by taking you." He set the glass down. "We had argued that night. You drove your own car. I was supposed to meet you at home. I was late. By the time I got the call, I was already on my way to the coast road." He paused, the memory still raw. "Before I even got to the site, I received a text. It was that photo, the one you found, a taunt. 'We have her.' Minutes later, I saw the fire, your car. It was an inferno. They took you, and then they blew up the car to make me think you were dead, to stop me from looking. And you believed it. For a while," he said. "I tore the Calabresi family apart. I burned their businesses, broke their power, put 2 of their capos in the ground. But I never found you. I spent 3 years hunting for that black SUV, for the men who took you. I thought you were a hostage. I thought, God, the things I imagined." His voice broke. "Just for a second, Mencius. Then I found you, in the diner, and you had no memory. The story didn't make sense. Why take you, erase your memory, and just leave you?" Lena's mind was working, the fog clearing, the fragments from her dreams and memories beginning to lock into place. "The man in the car," she said, her voice quiet. "The one who warned me. I remember his voice. I remember what I was doing before the car. I was in your office, at the mansion. I was looking for a document, and I overheard a call." Dante's eyes narrowed. "What call?" "It was Nico," she whispered, the name tasting like poison. "He was talking to someone. He was angry. He was talking about shipments, about you. He said, 'Dante is blind. He trusts me. By the time he realizes what I've done, I'll own this city.'" Dante's face was stone. "I didn't understand," Lena continued, the memories flowing faster. "But I knew it was wrong. I was going to tell you. But, someone stopped me. The man. My driver, he said you had an emergency, that I had to come with him. He was the one in the car with me. He was the one who said..." Nico was right. "He was trying to get me away, to warn me. He knew. And then the SUV." Dante finished, the pieces clicking into place with sickening precision. "And Dr. Levon," Lena said, her voice rising. "He wasn't my therapist. He was my jailer. He kept telling me not to remember. He gave me medication. He told me my name was Lena Marcelli. He built my life for me. He buried me." They stared at each other. The full, monstrous truth laid bare between them. "It wasn't a rival family," Dante said, his voice dripping with an acid-laced calm. "It was Nico. He was betraying me. You overheard him. He tried to silence you. He staged your death to cover his tracks. And when I went to war with the Calabresis, he helped me. He used my grief to wipe out his only competition." The scale of the betrayal was staggering. It left Lena breathless. Nico had not just tried to kill her, he had used her death to build his own empire. all while standing at Dante's side, mourning with him. Dante walked over to her. The anger was gone, replaced by a profound, suffocating guilt. He knelt in front of her, just as he had in the garden, but this time he looked broken. "They did this to you," he whispered. "But I lied to you these past few days. I didn't tell you about the photo. I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "That if you knew the truth, you would run. That you would see me for what I am, a man who brings death, that you would hate me, and I couldn't lose you again." He took her hands. They were cold. He brought them to his lips, kissing her fingers, then her palms, then the scar on her wrist. "I will earn you back, not Elena, you, Lena, the woman who survived this, the woman who fought them. I will earn your trust, piece by piece." He leaned in, and his lips met hers. It was not the desperate, claiming kiss from the library. It was not the hesitant, questioning kiss from the storm. It was a kiss of reverence. It was slow and deep, and it was a promise. It was an apology. Lena's hands, which had been limp in his, came up. She cupped his face, her fingers tracing the hard line of his jaw. She kissed him back. This was her choice. Not a memory, not an instinct, a choice. She was choosing this man, this life, this war. He gently lifted her from the sofa, his arms sliding under her, and carried her from the living room into the bedroom. He laid her on the bed, the sheets cool and white. The moonlight streamed in through the glass wall, bathing them in silver. He didn't move. He just looked at her, his eyes tracing every line of her face, as if memorizing her all over again. "I've dreamed of this," he said, his voice rough. "For 3 years, but I always woke up." "I'm not a dream, Dante," she whispered, her hand reaching for his. He unbuttoned his shirt, his eyes never leaving hers. He was covered in scars, not just the one on his chest, but a map of a violent life. She was not afraid. She sat up and let the blanket fall, her own body, with its one silver scar exposed to him. He came to her, his movements slow, deliberate. His fingers, calloused and trembling, traced the scar on her wrist. "They tried to take this from me," he whispered. He kissed it. Then his lips moved to her palm, her arm, her shoulder, her throat. It was not a frantic passion, it was an act of worship, of healing. He was memorizing her with his mouth, reclaiming every part of her they had tried to erase. Her hands explored him, tracing the hard muscles of his chest, her fingers finding the puckered scar over his heart. He flinched, but she leaned forward and pressed her lips to it, a mirror of his own action, a healing. "We're matched," she whispered again. "You are my home, Elena," he breathed, using her name, and for the first time, it sounded right. It was a collision of past and present, a quiet, profound healing that stitched their two broken worlds together. They came together not in a fiery explosion, but in a slow, deep tide of recognition. It was a mending, skin on skin, warmth on warmth, a silent promise that the loneliness was over. The next morning, Lena woke first. She was in his arms, his breathing deep and even. It was the first time in 3 years she had woken up without fear. She slipped from the bed, wrapping a sheet around herself, and went to the window. The city was waking up below. A sharp, urgent knock came at the apartment door. Dante was awake and out of bed, a gun in his hand. Before the second knock, he moved to the door, motioning for her to get back in the bedroom. "It's me, boss," Marco's voice called from the other side. Dante opened the door. Marco stepped in, his face pale and urgent. "The tail on Nico," Marco said, speaking low and fast. "He's making moves. He met with 2 capos from the Calabresi family, the ones who survived your purge. He's consolidating power. He's planning a full hostile takeover." Dante's face was cold. "He thinks he can take my chair." "That's not all," Marco said. "My source." He overheard the meeting. "Nico knows she's here. He knows she's with you. He told them. The ghost is back, and I have to put her in the ground for good." Her overhearing him. It wasn't just a business betrayal. It was treason. He's been feeding them information for years. He wants you dead, Dante. And he wants her dead to bury the secret of his first failure. Dante was silent. He looked back at the bedroom, where Lena was standing in the doorway, listening, the sheet clutched to her chest. He turned back to Marco, a lethal calm settling over him, the last trace of the grieving husband gone, replaced by the dawn. He wants a war. He gets one, Dante said, his voice flat. He thinks he can take my family, my life, my wife. He picked up his shirt from the floor. I am going to tear the syndicate apart, piece by piece, starting with him, and I will enjoy every second of it. The safe house was a pressure cooker. The air, tasting of filtered, conditioned stillness, was thick with unvented rage and the metallic scent of a brewing war. Dante was not the man Lena had kissed. He was not the grieving husband or the tender recluse. He was the dawn. His eyes were the color of glacial ice, and his voice was a low, flat instrument of command. He thinks he has me on the defensive, Dante said, standing over a map of the city spread across a glass dining table. He thinks I'm scrambling to protect her. He's right, but we're going to use it. Marco, his face grim, pointed to a location in the hills north of the city. The old Rossi vineyard. It's remote. One road in, one road out. Easy to defend. And easy to ambush, Dante countered. He looked at his consigliere. Leak it. Use Sal. We've known he's been on Nico's payroll for 6 months. Tell him I'm moving Elena to the Rossi safe house tomorrow at noon. Make it look like a panicked, sloppy move. Nico will see the trap, Marco warned. I want him to see it, Dante said, his voice a chilling monotone. I want him to see a flawed, desperate plan. I want him to get cocky. He'll split his forces. He'll send a team to the vineyard to take her, and he'll use the opportunity to make his real move on me, thinking I'm distracted, but I'll be waiting for him. Lena watched from the doorway, a blanket clutched around her. She was the bait, a ghost to be moved around a chessboard. She hated it. The night they had shared, the healing, the intimacy, felt a world away, eclipsed by the cold. Hard business of his world. While they planned, she felt the walls of the safe house closing in. She was not a piece in their game. She was the one who had been erased, and the man who had done it was still out there. I have to go back, she said, her voice cutting through their strategic planning. Both men turned. Dante's expression was hard, unyielding. You are not leaving this apartment. I am not your prisoner. Dante, she said, her voice shaking but firm. She dropped the blanket. She was dressed. I am the one person who can end this. My memory is the weapon he's afraid of. You're trying to trap him, but I'm trying to remember. I have to go back to the clinic. Absolutely not. It wasn't a clinic, she pressed, walking toward him. The address on that file. It wasn't a hospital. It was a private residence. It was Dr. Levon's office. The place where he reprogrammed me. It's the one place Nico wouldn't think to look. Because he thinks Levon is his man, I have to go. She's right, Marco said quietly. Dante shot him a look of pure fury. Boss, she's right. If Levon kept records, if there's anything there, it could be the proof we need to turn the other capos against Nico. Right now, it's your word against his. Dante stared at her, a war raging behind his eyes. He saw her determination, the steel in her spine. This was not the frightened girl from the diner. This was Elena, the woman who had never been afraid to stand beside him. He gave a sharp, frustrated nod. Fine. 2 cars. 6 men. You do not go inside without them. You do not touch anything. Am I clear? Clear, she said. The clinic was a discreet brownstone in a quiet, wealthy neighborhood. It was the last place you would expect a Mafia-funded brainwashing to occur. The front plaque read, Dr. A. Levon, Psychiatric Trauma Recovery. The 6 men, including Marco, cleared the building first. It was empty. The air was stale, smelling of lemon polish and old paper. It was exactly as Lena remembered from her flashes. The leather couch, the heavy curtains, the faint, rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock in the hall. He's gone, Marco said, walking out of the back office. Cleared out, files, computer, everything. No, Lena whispered. She walked past him, into the office. Her eyes scanned the room. She had been here. She had sat in the chair opposite the desk while Levon's smooth, calm voice told her she was no one. He wouldn't destroy it, she said, more to herself. He was a scientist, a sadist. He would want to keep his experiment. His proof. Her eyes landed on the bookshelf. It was filled with thick, leather-bound psychiatric journals. She ran her fingers along the spines. One of them, a dark green volume, didn't feel right. It was hollow. She pulled it. It was a false book, a box. Inside, there was a single file and a small digital audio recorder. She opened the file. It was thick. It was her. But the name at the top was not blacked out. Elena Moretti. It detailed 3 months of treatment, a cocktail of experimental barbiturates, benzodiazepines, and a hypnotic agent. It was a recipe for erasing a mind. We have it. She breathed. She turned, holding the file, and saw Marco's face. He was pale, his phone pressed to his ear. "Boss," Marco said into the phone, his voice tight. "Lavon's gone. She found the file?" "Yes. Wait, I have another call. It's one of my men. A priority alert?" He switched lines. Lena watched his face go from pale to ashen. "What?" Dante's voice barked from the phone in Marco's hand. Marco switched back. "Nico didn't take the bait. The vineyard was a bust. He knew. He was one step ahead." "Marco, what is it?" Dante demanded. "It's my family," Marco said, his voice breaking. "He has them, my wife, my kids. He says he'll trade them for Dante." A new trap, a better one. Not for the ghost, for the king. "No," Lena whispered, the file dropping from her hand. "He wants a trade," Marco relayed, his voice hollow with terror. "At the old Montera shipyard, warehouse 7, midnight. Dante for my family. If he sees anyone else, he'll—" The line was silent, but they all heard the unspoken threat. Back in the safe house, the air was unbreathable. Dante was on the phone, his voice a low, lethal snarl, trying to find Marco's family, to get a location. It was useless. Nico had hidden them well. Midnight, that was in 2 hours. "You're not going," Lena said, standing in front of him. He hung up the phone. He looked at her. The cold, calculating dawn was gone, and the tormented man was back. "Marco has been with me for 20 years, he said. "He stood with my father. His children call me uncle. And he would be the first to tell you not to go," she pleaded, tears welling. "It's a trap, Dante. You know it. He won't honor the trade. He will kill you. And he will kill Marco. And then he will come for me. You will be handing him everything. If I do nothing, a woman and 2 children are dead. If you go, we are all dead," she screamed. She grabbed the front of his shirt, her fists clenching. You can't leave me. I just found you. I just remembered. I won't let you go." He pulled her into his arms, his grip so tight it was painful. He buried his face in her hair, and she felt his body shake, just once, with the weight of the impossible choice. "I lost you once," he whispered, his voice raw, broken. "I spent 3 years walking through hell. I will burn the world down before I lose you again." He pushed her back, his hands on her shoulders. His eyes were clear, his decision made, which is why this ends. Tonight, he will not hunt you anymore. He will not threaten our family anymore. I am going to end this, or he is going to end me. Either way, you will be free. "I don't want to be free," she wept. "I want you." "And you will have me," he said. He gave her a hard, desperate kiss. It was not tender. It was a kiss of gunpowder and blood and a final, desperate promise. "Lock this door. Do not open it for anyone but me. Do you understand?" He turned and walked out. The door shut. The heavy, metallic thud of the security lock sliding into place echoed in the sterile room. She was a prisoner once again. Lena collapsed against the door, her body shaking. She would not let this happen. He was walking to his own execution, and he had locked her away. Her hand brushed the pocket of her jeans, the audio recorder. She had been so focused on the file, she hadn't listened to it. She pulled it out, her fingers fumbling with the small button. She pressed play, static, then a voice, Doctor. Lavon's, smooth, paternal, and utterly monstrous. "We will begin again. Elena is gone. Elena is dead." Then her own voice, slurred, weak, terrified. Dead. I'm dead." "That's right," Lavon's voice cooed. She's a bad memory, a painful one. We're going to wash her away. You are Lena, a new life, a quiet life. You will work. You will be alone. You will forget the fire. You will forget the pain. You will forget him. A pause. Then Levan's voice, harder, colder. You must forget. Because if you remember, he will find you. And if he finds you, Nico will kill you both. Become someone new. Lena, become someone new. Or die. They will find you. And you will die. Lena's blood ran cold. The recording wasn't just proof of the brainwashing. It was proof of Nico's intent. It was the entire conspiracy spoken aloud. She ran to the door, pounding on it. Guards, let me out. I have to... Let me out. There was no answer. Dante's orders were absolute. She looked around the room, frantic. The window. It was thick. Reinforced glass. It wouldn't break. The bathroom, the vent, it was too small. She was trapped. But Dante had designed the safe house, and Elena had known his secrets. Lena ran to the bedroom, to the large walk-in closet behind a false panel of cedar, where Dante kept a spare safe. She felt along the wall, a memory. Not a memory, but an instinct. Her fingers found a small, recessed button. A section of the wall clicked open, revealing a narrow, dark passage, an emergency exit, the one he had built for her 3 years ago, the one he had forgotten to tell her about in her new life. She ran into the darkness. The Montera shipyard was a graveyard of giants. Rusted freighters and skeletal cranes loomed against the night sky, black silhouettes against a starless, smoggy canvas. The air tasted of salt, rust, and diesel. Warehouse 7, Dante walked alone into the vast, cavernous space. A single, powerful floodlight lit the center, creating a cruel stage. In the middle, Marco was tied to a steel chair. His face was a mess of blood and bruises, his eyes swollen shut, but he was breathing. On a raised catwalk above him stood Nico Valente. He was not in shadow. He was bathed in the light, a bottle of whiskey in one hand, a gun in the other. He was smiling. The great Don, Nico sneered, his voice echoing in the metal space. Look at you, the king, come to trade his crown for a broken pawn. Let him go, Nico, Dante said, his voice dangerously calm. He stood in the center of the light, his hands open at his sides. His family? Safe, Nico said with a wave. For now. I'm a man of my word. Dante, unlike you lied to me. For years, you made me your second, your dog, but you never trusted me. You never gave me what I deserved. What you deserved was a bullet, Dante said. You betrayed my family. You betrayed her. Her, Nico laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. It always came back to her. She was your weakness. She made you soft. She had to listen, didn't she? Poking her nose into my business with the Calabresis. I gave you the world. Dante, I helped you wipe them out, and you spent your time crying over a ghost you created. Dante growled. A mistake I am here to fix, Nico said. First your dog, then you, and then I will find your precious ghost, and I will put her in the ground where she belongs. She's not a ghost, and you won't touch her. A new voice. It was quiet, but it cut through the vast warehouse, amplified by a small, tinny speaker. She's right here, Nico. Lena stepped out from behind a massive, rusted shipping container. She was holding the small digital recorder, connected to a portable speaker she'd grabbed from the safe house. Her hand was shaking so violently she could barely hold it up. Nico's smile vanished, his face contorted in disbelief, then pure, unadulterated rage. You! Dante's blood ran cold. Lena, get out of here now! I don't think she can, Nico snarled. I have the proof. Nico, Lena called out, her voice trembling but gaining strength. I have the recording from Levan. She pressed the play button. Become someone new, Lena, or die. They will find you and you will die. The doctor's voice echoed through the warehouse, a damning, spectral judgment. Marco, bloody and barely conscious, lifted his head. Nico's face was a mask of hatred. He had been outmaneuvered by her. You should have stayed dead, he sneered. He raised his gun, not at Dante, not at Marco. He aimed it straight at Lena. Dante saw it. the shift in his eyes, the tensing of his arm. Nico fired. Dante lunged. He moved, a black blur, diving, not to attack, but to shield. He threw his body in front of hers, a roar of pure, primal rage tearing from his throat. A final, deafening gunshot rang out, the sound of physical blow in the enclosed space. It echoed once, twice, and then faded. Blood. Silence. The floodlight cast a harsh, unforgiving glare on the three figures, frozen in a tableau of death. The echo of the final gunshot ripped through the cavernous warehouse and died, leaving a silence that was heavier and more terrible than the noise. For a second, everything was frozen. Nico Valente stood on the catwalk, his gun still raised, his expression of murderous rage locked on his face. He looked down, confused, at the dark, spreading stain on his white shirt just over his heart. He tried to speak, but only a wet, gurgling sound escaped. He swayed, his whiskey bottle smashing on the steel grate, and then he toppled forward, crashing onto the concrete floor below, dead. Lena stood frozen, her arm outstretched, the heavy black pistol she had grabbed from the safe house exit shaking violently. The sound was still ringing in her ears. Dante was on the ground. He had lunged to shield her, but Nico's shot had gone wide. No. He was pushing himself up, his face pale and twisted in pain. There was a dark, wet patch soaking his left shoulder. High on the chest, he was hit, but he was alive. "Lena!" he gasped, his eyes wide, looking not at his own wound, but at the gun in her hand and the body of his rival on the floor. She had done it. She had fired. She had killed a man. The gun dropped from her nerveless fingers, clattering loudly on the concrete. Her legs gave out. The sound of sirens, distant but approaching fast, sliced through the night. Then, the grinding of tires on gravel. Doors slammed. Two uniformed police officers, their guns drawn, burst into the warehouse, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. "Hands up! Don't move!" But before they could take 2 steps, shadows detached themselves from the shipping containers. 4, then 8, then a dozen of Dante's men, all armed, all silent, emerged. They did not raise their weapons. They simply appeared, a wall of dark suits, surrounding the officers, flanking their boss. One of the officers, a sergeant with a thick mustache, lowered his weapon, his eyes widening. He recognized the men. He recognized Dante. He realized, with a sinking stomach, that he had walked into the wrong side of a war, and he was on the losing end. Nico's men were gone, and the king was still standing. "There's been a misunderstanding, Mr. Moretti," the sergeant said, his voice suddenly oily. "We got a call about trespassing." Dante ignored him. He stumbled to his feet, clutching his shoulder, his eyes never leaving Lena. He walked past the officers, past his own men, and went straight to her. She was on her knees, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. The reality of the last 5 minutes, the gunshot, the blood, the sight of Nico's lifeless eyes crashed over her. A low, animal sob tore from her throat. It was not a cry of fear, but of profound, agonizing shock. She was a killer. Dante knelt in front of her, his own pain forgotten. He reached out with his good arm and pulled her head against his uninjured shoulder. He wrapped his arm around her, crushing her to him as she broke down, her sobs echoing in the vast, terrible space. His men stood guard, a silent, lethal circle, keeping the world at bay. He held her, stroking her hair, his chin resting on her head. He let her cry, absorbing the shock and the trauma into himself. "Shh," he whispered, his voice a low, rough rumble against her ear. "It's over. It's over." He pulled her back, forcing her to look at him. His face was pale, his lips blue with pain, but his eyes were blazing with a fierce, unwavering light. "You did it. You saved us. You found your way back to me. Elena. You found your way back." The world dissolved into a blur of motion. Marco, cut free from the chair, was alive, his family already rescued by a separate team. Dante was moved, not to an ambulance, but to a private car. Lena never left his side, her hand gripping his, her knuckles white. They took him to a private wing of a hospital that the Moretti family had funded for 50 years. The doctors and nurses were discreet, efficient, and asked no questions about the gunshot wound. The bullet had gone clean through, missing the artery but shattering his collarbone. It was painful, messy, but it would not kill him. Lena sat by his bedside for 3 days. She did not sleep. She did not leave. She watched the steady rise and fall of his chest, the heart monitor's rhythmic beep, the only sound in the room. The nurses tried to make her rest, but she refused. She had lost him once to a moment of violence. She would not lose him again, even to sleep. When he woke, his first word was her name. "Lena!" She was there, her hand instantly finding his. "I'm here. Dante, I'm right here." He was weak, his voice a dry rasp. You saved me." Tears streamed down her face. I killed him." "You survived," he corrected, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "You did what I trained you to do, what I had forgotten you were capable of." He looked at her, the woman who had faced down his greatest enemy, and his eyes were filled with a raw, profound awe. Their love, rekindled in the shadow of death, deepened in the sterile quiet of that room. It was not a grand passion now. It was something stronger, forged in shared trauma and absolute loyalty. It was in the quiet moments. It was Lena, her touch gentle, helping him sit up, her hand steady as she held a glass of water to his lips. It was him, weak as he was, pulling her hand to his mouth and kissing the scar on her wrist. A silent thank you. She would read to him from the art books she'd found in her old sitting room. He would listen, not to the words, but to the sound of her voice, the melody he had thought was gone from his life forever. At night, she would finally drift off in the armchair, and he would watch her, a dark, silent guardian, even in his own wounded state. He saw both women in her now, the soft, loving Elena he had married, and the hard, resilient Lena who had survived the fire. 2 weeks later, he was back at the mansion. His arm was in a heavy sling, but his strength was returning. The house was quieter. It was cleaner. Dante had spent his recovery on the phone. The syndicate was undergoing a purge. Nico's betrayal had run deep. 2 capos were gone. 12 soldiers vanished. The corrupt police sergeant from the warehouse was arrested on unrelated charges. The business that Nico had started, the trafficking, the deep, dark operations she had overheard, Dante cut them out. He severed ties with the Calabresis, not with bullets, but with a cold finality that cut off their supply lines. He was restructuring, turning the syndicate from an organization of aggression into a fortress of protection. He was in his office, signing papers with his left hand. When Lena walked in, she was wearing a simple white dress, not lace, but cotton. "Marco is here," she said. Dante nodded. He walked out onto the grand terrace, the one overlooking the rose garden. Marco was there, his face healed. Beside him stood his wife and his 2 small children, who ran immediately to Dante. "Uncle Dante!" Dante knelt, wincing, and hugged them with his good arm. He looked up at Marco. "Thank you for bringing them." "Thank you, boss, for my life. Go, take a vacation, a real one," Dante ordered. "You've earned it." When they were gone, Dante turned to Lena. The sun was setting, casting the garden in a warm, golden light. He reached into his pocket. "I was going to do this a week ago, but I wanted to be standing," he said. He held out his hand. On his palm sat a simple, elegant diamond ring, her wedding ring. He had kept it in his safe for 3 years. I know this is not the life you would have chosen," he said, his voice rough. "Not the one you had, and not the one you built. But it's the one we have, and I cannot live it without you." He looked her in the eye. "You are my wife. You were in the church, and you were in that diner. You are, and you always will be. But I'm asking you, this time, to choose it. Choose me." Lena looked at the ring, the symbol of a life she barely remembered, offered by the man she could never forget. "Elena Moretti," she said, testing the name. "She seems like a woman I would have liked. She was strong, she was in love." She looked at Dante. "But Lena Marcelli, she's the one who survived. She's the one who learned to be alone. She's the one who found you." She held out her left hand. "I am both of them. I am Elena, who you married, and I am Lena, who you saved." He smiled, a true, warm smile that lit his entire face, erasing the last of the shadows. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He did not kiss her. Instead, he just held her hand, lacing his fingers with hers, and led her down the steps into the garden. They walked to the bench where he had knelt and kissed her palm. They sat in the twilight, the scent of roses filling the air. The silence was comfortable, complete. "We survived hell, you and I," Dante said, his voice a low, reflective rumble. He looked at the house, his fortress, and then at her, his queen. "Now, let's build something that feels like heaven." Lena leaned her head on his good shoulder. She felt the solid, steady beat of his heart against her. She felt the scar on his chest, a permanent reminder of their pain. And her hand, holding his, felt the matching scar on her own wrist. She was home. Not in the mansion, not in the city, but here, with him. She was no longer a ghost, and he was no longer a hollow man. They were two halves of a whole, scarred and imperfect, but finally, together. "I'm home," she whispered. Dante tightened his arm around her, holding her as the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I truly hope you enjoyed the journey of Lena and Dante. We would love to know where you are listening from, so please drop a comment and say hello. Your thoughts and feedback mean the world to us. If you love stories like this, please consider subscribing to our channel, Mafia Romance Stories. For many more to come, thank you for being a part of our community.